Hey, I'm Tony Moreland, and this is the Samsung Developers Podcast, where we chat with innovators using Samsung technologies, award-winning app developers and designers, as well as insiders working on the latest Samsung tools. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 7. Recently, I hosted a roundtable discussion on developing for foldable devices. Not only do we chat about the emerging trends in the foldable industry, but how companies are working together to help developers create for this new and innovative technology. Enjoy.
Today's show, we're doing something pretty special. I've got 3 guests on the podcast, all from leading companies in the foldable space. I've got Guy Merin, Senior Director of Engineering on the Surface Duo Developer Experience team at Microsoft. How's it going, Guy?
Hi, Tony. Good morning. Great to be here.
Excellent. I've also got Oshineye, Senior Staff Developer Advocate at Google.
Hi, nice to be here.
And I've also got Soren Lambaek, Developer Relations Engineer at Samsung.
Hello, good to be here.
This is amazing. I've got all of you on the podcast at the same time. We actually haven't tried this format before, so let's take it for a ride and see how much fun we can have. Let me start with the guy over at Microsoft. Tell me, who is Guy Merin?
Hi, folks. So I'm Guy. Started the journey in Microsoft a few years back. Started at Windows, went through the Windows Mobile, because mobile and gadgets and devices are really my passion. And then in the last 5 or so years, I've been working full-time on Android, building a couple of software products, and recently the Surface Duo. So this mobile and Android is really my passion, and I'm really at my dream job now, working with developers, reaching out, really great. On the personal level, I got recently into mountain climbing. So just this last weekend, we had a big expedition to summit one of the Washington mountains. I live in Seattle in Washington.
Okay.
And that was a very, very fun experience that I found a lot of similarities to, projects we have at work. Climbing a mountain and summiting is really a project on its own with preparation and planning, and found a lot of interesting similarities.
It gives you a lot of time to think also, I'm sure, that when you're climbing. So are you like with ropes and rappelling, or are you
rope.
Really?
It's more snow, so it's ropes and ice axes and stuff. But
oh gosh,
yeah,
that is good. Yeah. How many feet would you say was the summit?
Close to 11,000. So
wow, that is absolutely impressive. What was your journey to get to the state of Washington? Were you born there, or is this the accent I'm picking up? I'm not quite sure is from the Northwest.
No. So no, I was born and raised in Israel.
Okay.
And I moved over to Washington 8 years ago. I've been working at Microsoft in Israel, actually doing some phone stuff with Windows Phone in Israel. And then pretty much my wife wanted to move over to Seattle, and that made us take the trip, and we love it here.
So now let's move over to Google. Tell me, who is Oshineye?
So I work in Android developer relations. I've worked all over the different aspects of Google over the last 15 years. Before that, I was in consultancy. When I'm not at a desk in front of cameras and things, I'm out with a camera taking photos in Zurich, where we have really nice mountains, but I like to climb them by sitting in a train that just gently takes you to the top. And then I also play badminton and play Go. So between that, I'm pretty busy.
Wonderful. And I understand you actually were born and raised in England. Is that correct?
Yes. So I'm an East Londoner, but now I live in Switzerland, which is strange and very different to East London. But I also live in the middle of a whole collection of British shops, so that I can get British food very easily.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Tell me, how did you get involved with foldables at Google?
Well, me specifically, I started out with the Samsung Flip, and then I've got played with the Surface Duo. For us as a company, it's more around the whole be together, not the same. The idea that the point of the Android ecosystem is that all of these OEMs can try different things. Users can try different kinds of experiences. Developers can try to serve all of them. And we power all of that with the platform.
And from Samsung, tell me, who is Soren Lambaek.
Hello. I work at Samsung as a developer relations engineer, and basically I am building relationships between the games industry and Samsung. There's so many mobile games out there, so we are reaching out to them at a technical level and try to help their games to run smooth on Samsung devices. On a more personal level, I am one of those artists that just got obsessed with programming.
Sure.
So my background is actually a lot of with art, drawing and music and that kind of thing. But I just could see the programming was so powerful. So I got this obsession and just start programming.
Excellent. And I know that you guys can't see on the podcast, but Soren has some beautiful guitars behind him. And before we hit the record button, we were all having a nice conversation about music. Now, I understand you were born in Chile, but raised in England. Is that correct?
No. So I was born in Chile. That's correct. I was raised up in Denmark. Hence my name. And my name is Danish. And
okay.
Because Denmark is such a small country, and at the time I wanted to get a career, we didn't have any games industry in Denmark. So I decided I wanted to go to England and went on university studying games design. Because there was art, but then I realized programming, that's where the future is for me. And then, so I was one of the only students that went from art to programming. It's usually the other way around.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely think so. So let's talk foldables. Back in 2019, Samsung released the Galaxy Fold, which was the first foldable device to really hit the mainstream market. Since then, other companies like Microsoft, Motorola, Huawei have released foldable devices. And in such a short amount of time, we've seen some really great improvements with this technology. Guy, you being from Microsoft, what are some of the trends that you've noticed in the foldable industry?
Some of the trends. One, we're seeing, as you said, more OEMs picking those up. You're seeing more and more companies bringing foldables, and it's really starting to become a commodity. But the cool thing about it that each one has their own different angle to it. So, for the Microsoft one, it's, mainly around productivity and two screens. For others, it's mainly around more real estate or something that is a small phone that can then go to a bigger phone. And it's all really about the form factors and the postures that you can really do with it. So how does the phone react when it's folded, when it's open, when it's tilted 90 degrees? And I think we'll see more of those in the future.
Ade, are you seeing different trends for the way developers are designing and building apps?
So I think we're seeing three main trends. One is the OEMs exploring the space of possible designs. Does the device fold in, fold out, fold vertically, fold horizontally, fold 3 times? There's so many different things OEMs are doing. Second is styluses becoming more and more mainstream. That's changing the set of available postures. And then the final thing is the way keyboards and trackpads are blurring the distinctions between phones, phablets, tablets. So the whole notion of what is an Android app is becoming this flexible, multi-dimensional space, and there's all these people exploring that space and trying new things.
Yeah. Soren, what about the growth in this industry? Has this been something that you think, over the past several years, it's really been, going much higher?
Yeah, so last year we had 150% growth, and we are expecting that in the future. More and more people seems to get foldable phones. And when it comes to games, it does have quite a lot of benefits because you can use the second screen if you put it in a folded a bit.
Sure.
You can change it from full screen to completely different mode where the bottom screen you can use it for items or mini map and that kind of thing.
Yeah. This technology is so new that it's at this time I think we're still trying to figure out what is this target audience. Ade, what are your thoughts on who is the target audience for foldables?
Well, I think a good way of thinking about it would be to look at the Flip and the Surface Duo as capturing the two sets of audiences we see. There are the often younger people who are looking for cool new experiences.
Yeah.
And I tend to see a lot of those people run around with a Samsung Flip. But then you also see a set of people at the higher end who have a lot more money, tend to be more business people. They tend to have the larger, the Fold or a Duo or something like that has a stylus that runs multiple apps at the same time. That's sort of almost a replacement laptop. And those are the two sets of people I tend to see using foldables.
Guy, do you have any thoughts on the demographic of who is attracted to foldables?
I don't see it as a demographic thing. I think it will become a commodity that more and more users across the world will see it. I think right now we're still seeing trends because it's on the higher end of cost.
Yeah.
So we're seeing trends around there. But when this becomes more of a commodity, and I think it will, and more of a mainstream device, I don't think it's going to be a demographic thing. Just like we're seeing with other form factors that are spread across the world.
Yeah. And Soren, you had mentioned about gamers. Tell me your thoughts on why something like a foldable device would be attracted to the gaming community.
Well, obviously, a big screen will have a big effect. Not only can you see like a lot of graphics, the UI can change, and you can have like a different benefits doing that.
So, what would it take for foldables to become more mainstream?
The price is a major one. Foldable phones are quite pricey.
Sure.
Reducing the price would make it more accessible for a lot of people, really.
Yeah, and I also think that really trying to teach developers how to build apps, more education on app adaptation is also important.
Yeah, definitely. We see a lot of games developers don't even consider foldable phones yet. So I hope that is something that's going to change, where they could start maybe changing the UI before they're actually building the game.
I think, Tony, if I may add one thing,
yeah.
I think it's a triangle of three things. There is, the users, and the users needs to see the benefit of why they should, try a foldable phone or a large screen. And then what drives that is apps. So the more apps that we see that utilize it, that gives them benefits over using just a single screen, smaller device, the more apps that will use things like side-by-side or split screen or drag and drop between, and just productivity and things that users can get more out of these apps when running on these new form factors. I think that's another key factor. And I think the third piece of this triangle is, in order to make app better on those, you need to support it at the SDK level and at the platform.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work that is being done by everybody here. So mainly by Google, because they, of course, own the platform. So the more we will see those things as standard, like Jetpack Compose. So how do you support foldables there? How do you support all the other SDKs? The more that it will come native, the better the apps will get, the better the users will benefit from them. And I think that triangle, doing it correctly, will make it much more mainstream in the future.
I agree with that. I think one other thing that we've been pushing is about getting developers across the chasm of thinking about this. So we have a code lab we put together with Microsoft that shows developers how to build for a world where the devices can be radically different sizes. I mean, on my desk here, I have a Samsung Flip and a Samsung Ultra, and they are radically different sizes. One of them can fold to be even smaller. So if you want to build for both of these devices and all the things in between, you have to think about, am I going to be a responsibly designed app or an adaptive app? I have to think about which layouts I'm going to support, which postures I'm going to support, which aspect ratios, which resolutions. And developers for a long time have been able to sort of not really think very hard about that, because most phones for a long time were fairly similar sizes. Now, the same Kindle app that has to fold nicely on a Surface Duo has to also work on a giant tablet. For example, we have Duo and Meet, and the same APK, more or less, that runs on your phone also runs on your television. When we think of this as large screens, the screens can be very large.
What about Google's quality guidelines?
So the challenge for us with quality guidelines is we don't want to stifle innovation, but we do want to make sure that when a user downloads an app from our store, that it works well on their device, and that there's a well-lit path for developers in how do I give users the best possible experience. So we have very detailed guidelines and implementation advice on what is a high quality experience. And then we have tiers of quality so that you don't have to take a big jump. You don't have to eat the elephant in one bite. You can, I think it's eat the rhinoceros in one bite. You can do it in lots of little bites.
Sure.
So there are steps you can take to improve your quality. And we have a easy to understand website that shows you, has all the things you haven't done yet, and you can decide which ones to invest in and when.
Yeah, and I'll mention here that I know throughout this podcast that you guys will be referencing lots of resources for developers to really learn more about how to create for foldables. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes so that you guys can easily find this content. So, Guy, tell me, who do you think would benefit by developing for the foldable form factor and why?
I think everybody will benefit from it. The bottom of the funnel is the apps and the users. So the users will benefit the most. But I think you're asking more about the developers. I think every developer should look at, and as Audrey said here before, my app is not going to run now only on a single screen, small device. It will span across others. Every developer should think about their app. What else can I do now that I have more real estate? And again, if it's a game, okay, what do I do with the second screen? How will my game, maybe if I run the game in a split screen with Discord on the other side, because I'm using that for gaming as well.
Sure.
So start thinking about all these new scenarios that your app can now do. How can I provide content to the app that sits just beside me with drag and drop functionalities, with these kind of things? And I think every app, every developer can benefit from those and should start thinking about that, because this is preparing for the future and for more and more of these devices showing in market.
Yeah. And I know the other day, Ade and I were actually having a conversation about multi-app user journeys.
So we've tried to move away from thinking of use cases or scenarios to what we call CUJs, critical user journeys. And part of that is because if I'm at home during the pandemic, I tend to have Google Docs open with meeting notes and then Google Meet open. Now, if you move that to a foldable, well, that's one screen each. But then I need to drag and drop things across them, which means both developers need to think, am I a good citizen? Does my app play well with others? Historically, developers have tended to think about the user journey only within their own app. But if you're a video chat app, you need to think, okay, how do I work well with a game, with video content somebody's watching? If I'm a video app, do I have picture-in-picture? If I have picture-in-picture, it unlocks all sorts of interesting new user journeys for the user. If I'm a game and I support multi-window scenarios, it becomes possible for somebody to play a game and live stream it, or play a game and have a chat conversation going on at the same time. So trying to think about the user journey that's not just inside your one app, but it's across your app and other apps, or even across multiple instances of your app.
Soren, tell me, what should a developer with an existing app do to extend it to foldables?
So there's quite a lot of SDKs that can be used already. Jetpack Windows Manager is an Android library that can help you with detecting if your app is spanning over multiple screens or not.
What about specifically game developers? Maybe someone who's developing, for Unity or for Unreal. Are there resources out there to help them?
Yeah, so Samsung got some tutorials that will help you to set up foldable apps for Unity and Unreal, both of them.
Tony, if I may, I can add one thing on the first question. What could developer do with their existing app? We put up a 3-step guide, and it's not specifically for the Microsoft Surface Duo. It's for large screen and all the foldables. And really, the 3 steps is crawl, walk, run. So you should start with just taking your app and just trying it out on these new form factors. If you have access to one of these devices, just try it there. If you don't, there is emulators for everything, for foldables, for a Duo, for a large screen. So just try your app on the emulator. That's step 1. Just see that it behaves well on these new form factors using an emulator. Step 2 is what we call the low-hanging fruit. So don't super invest, but start small. As others said, maybe think about how can my app behave when it's running with another app. So maybe support drag and drop, either as a source or as a destination. Consider doing picture-in-picture, things like that. These are things that are super easy. There's samples, there's code snippets that you can just go and copy paste into your app and just support that. These are really small additions you can do, and then it will really shine on those new devices. And step 3 is where really all the magic can happen. You have more real estate now, so there's many new design patterns. You can think about least details. You can think about a companion pane and a few others. So what now will you do in your app that, you have more real estate? You can do things differently. This is step 3, which is, I think, where all the big value will come, but it's a journey towards getting there.
Definitely. I think one other thing you may want to include is at the most basic level, you should check things like, if I rotate my phone, does your device crash? Does the app crash? Or does it handle it? And then you think, okay, so you handle rotation. You don't lose state. If I'm halfway through typing a message and I accidentally rotate my tablet, do you lose my message? That's bad.
Yeah.
So that continuity is an important thing. All the way up to things like handling hinge occlusion. So if you've got a Surface Duo, there's a hinge down the middle. You've got to remember that we have an API for that. Handling different postures of the device and even trying to see if you can use those postures to offer new functionality. But for a lot of developers, it's stepping back, thinking about all the different contexts in which people are going to try to use your app, and then making sure that you've handled them.
Yeah, and Guy, you had mentioned about testing. I wanted to also bring up that Samsung has their remote test lab where you can online access a real device for testing your app. So another great resource for developers to work with.
Definitely. It's also that and the emulator. The emulator is also an amazing resource because you can run it locally, you can run it on the cloud. We have some workflows that connect to a cloud emulator. So every time, we have a few samples. So every time we do a check-in for the sample, it spins off an emulator and tests it.
That's great.
So we have all these test labs, and none of that is specific to us, to the Duo. You can run it with any other device as well.
Tell me, what is the Figma Design Kit?
Figma Design Kit is a tool for designers to start thinking about foldables and large screens and dual screens. So when we started the journey with developers, we first were thinking about the developers. How do we support you with SDKs and with samples and with documentation? That's step 2, actually. Step 1 is thinking about your designs. And then we started looking, what are the tools that designers use? So Figma is one of them, and there are others. So we just created a Figma Design Kit for foldables. So it lists out all the layouts that are possible. Again, the least detail, the companion pane, and a few others. It gives you all the frames, and it really helps you think about the scenarios you want to cover in your app for these new form factors. And then you start working with the developers on the SDK. There's actually a step 3 that we're trying to do in the future, which is how do we make it easy taking a Figma Design Kit or another flow and making that into code. I think that's going to be the next step in the future.
Ade, tell me about the Jetpack Window Manager and the Jet News demo app.
So, like many people, we have quite old demos that were written in a world where you had a phone, you had a tablet. And so we, like everybody else, had to think about, okay, how do we change this to handle different postures, different aspect ratios? So we have an article where we walk through the process we went through to use Jetpack Window Manager to handle a lot of these configuration changes, to handle continuity, rotation, a lot of those things. So we've got actually a pretty good article about this. I think one of the things we don't touch on in that article that I think is really important is if I have an existing app that people like, and it's too expensive for me to do a complete rewrite, how do I start adding some of the new things into it? So we have a new thing called activity embedding, which lets you get a foot in the door with Compose or with starting to add these new, more complex layouts. So maybe your app was just, I have a bunch of cards that go vertically up and down the screen, but it's actually no longer a phone, it's a device that folds out, is now twice the size. So now I need to think, okay, I need to go to a list detail view. Gmail is a good example of this. You do that unfold or you rotate, and now you have so much more screen estate. The challenge is, how do I embed the new, more complex layout in the existing set of layouts I already have without having to do a rewrite? So there's a lot of that functionality that we're trying to show people, because we don't want to fall in the trap of the only way you can get to the new world is to burn everything down and start again. We want to give people an incremental path from where they are to where they need to get to.
I was at GDC this past year, and Samsung had a great presentation. Soren, did you get a chance to see that presentation at GDC where they talked about developing for foldables?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It was one of our team members, Mike, that was doing a presentation.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include a link to that presentation. It was great because they covered foldable optimizations for game engines like Unity and Unreal, talked about Android Jetpack APIs and Window Manager, showed examples of things like flex mode and UI scaling, and even had an engineer from Unity talk about Adaptive Performance 4.0. Ade, tell me, what should a developer consider when writing a new app for foldables?
My immediate reaction to this is, first of all, should I use views or should I use compose? But in talking to more and more of my colleagues, they all go, well, obviously they should use compose because compose is the future. So the official Google recommendation, if you're starting from scratch, start with compose. It will mature as your app matures. The other things to think about is what makes foldables special. It's the fact they have all of these postures. They have all of these different kinds of usage scenarios that they offer. And then you want to avoid littering your code with designs that are attached to a specific screen size or a specific aspect ratio or a specific resolution. And instead, you've got to decide, am I adaptive or responsive? Will I try to scale the same design? Or will I move the components around when the posture or the orientation or the size changes? It's a difference between an app that's a list of cards and the cards just get bigger, and an app that says, well, when you rotate me, I go to a list detail view.
And Guy, what are your thoughts on what a developer should consider when they're writing a new app for foldables?
So I think a developer should consider a couple of things. One, there's folding features. Specifically for Duo, we have a hinge in the middle. So if you have like controls, do you want to put them in the middle, or maybe you want to lay them out a little differently? For game developers, we did a lot of work, for example, with Xbox. So when you play a game, you can have the controls on one screen and the game on the other screen. So the controls, are now have their own dedicated space. So maybe you can do some stuff with it. So, for example, the one thing we did is, depending on where you are in the game itself, the controller themes and the way they look change. So if you're now a pirate on a ship and you're in a sword fight or something, the controllers change to be a sword, for example, or things like that. And then other considerations are the postures. So what happens when the device is folded? What happens when it's open? What happens when you rotate it? And all these will change the layout of the app and show different controls and options for the user.
Yeah. Soren, what would you say are some of the common issues that could come up when designing around foldables?
I think it's important for developers to consider the UI, because on the Samsung Fold, when the phone is folded, we got like a single display.
Yeah. So
the aspect ratio on that one is very different to when you got it unfolded. So the UI, you will have much less space for UI. So that is something that's very important, that the transition from going from single display to multi-display, that the UI will change so it fits. There's no point of like, you can see all the UI on when it's unfolded, and then when you go to the single screen, half of the UI is not accessible or you can't see it. So that's very, very important that you test that on your phone.
Yeah, and I know at the GDC presentation, that's one of the things that Mike covered, was how to have your game go from the single screen, and then when you open up the device, how it transitions to the dual screen.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, actually, that reminds me. One thing I keep mentioning continuity. And mostly people think, oh, I have my device, let's say it's a tablet like this Ultra I have in my hand, and in the vertical orientation, that's easy. And if I rotate, I don't want to lose my state. That's typically what we've always meant by continuity. But once you have a device that folds, especially if you've got something that has 3 screens, an outer screen and then 2 inner screens, I may launch something on the outer screen, then I open it up, and then the app has to move, the activity has to move from that outer screen to now maybe spread out across both screens. And then if I fold it the other way, so I'm now on one of the inner screens, the app has to not lose state.
Yeah.
Now, we have a bunch of guidance on how you do that for normal apps. Where it gets especially tricky is when it's things like camera, where you may not just be moving an activity across screens, but it may actually move it across cameras.
Oh, okay.
So this is one of those places where if you have a real device in your hand, you can see it, and you can see how, for a user, this would be a very comfortable, obvious thing they would expect, holding the device in their hands. But for you sitting behind your keyboard, it might not leap out as you as an obvious thing for a user to do.
Yeah.
So if you sit with say a Samsung Flip, you can take a selfie on it, but you might just very easily rotate in your hand, and because you want to take a selfie with the other camera. For your app, that's a very complicated thing. For the user, it's the most natural thing in the world.
Sure.
So it's important to think about continuity across the different surfaces of the foldable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me give another example with an email app. It could be Gmail, it can be Outlook, it could be whatever you're using. And I think foldable or dual screen is really a great way to read emails. So if until now I was used to, in the morning to get to my emails on a single screen device, so I just have a list of emails and then I go into each one of them, read it, go back, go to each one of them, read it, go back, reply, what have you. If you now have a larger screen, you can have the least detail. So I see all the emails in one place, I click them, and then on the other side, I see the actual email that I need to address. And now if I have to, is a lengthy email, if I have to read it, I can rotate the device, and then I get into this A4 mode that I across the whole screen, I just see the whole email as detail. And then when I hit the reply button, it can go into this laptop mode that, the keyboard goes from the bottom, and then I could start replying to it. And when I'm done, I get back to the least detail up to my next email. So it really can serve as a laptop replacement.
Yeah.
Because you have a larger screen, you can do pretty much in a productive manner what you can do with your regular PC or Mac.
Yeah, for sure. So, Guy, do you think it's a misconception that developers need to do a lot of custom work that's only going to be, or that's only going to add value to a foldable device?
I think it's a misconception, definitely. There's actually not a lot of work you need to do. As I said before, you can start small with just adding drag and drop functionality or picture in picture, and that will work across every place, every form factor, around large screen, small screen, and you're using native APIs in the SDK. To support a foldable, you don't need to pick up another SDK for it. It's all supported natively, and whatever you do will work across all these devices. And again, in the future, it can work on the TV or other on a watch. So whatever your app will do, consider all these layouts, provide layouts screens for each one of those new form factors. A single app will work on all of it.
Yeah, I think something I did this weekend is I went and dug up all of my old Android devices. I have Android devices going back to the G1 and even the ones before the G1 that I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about in public, all the way to the latest ones from today. And as a developer, handling all of these different scenarios is actually increasing the maintainability of your app. Because if I think about the screen on the G1 and the resolution of that, and I think about that compared to the resolution on the Pixel 6, it's a huge jump. And the screens are so much bigger. So think about the kind of devices we'll have 5 years from now. How much bigger, how much higher resolution will those screens be? How often do you want to rewrite your app between now and then? Versus, oh, it's just a bigger screen or it's a different posture. And being able to make it a relatively simple migration or maintenance step versus yet another rewrite.
So tell me, Soren, what are some good examples of existing apps that are taking advantage of the foldable form factor?
So we have seen a lot of retro games actually utilizing the phone a lot. So because retro games don't really have that much heavy graphics, so they got like plenty of space that they can use.
Sure.
So we have seen where people are using a virtual gamepad on one screen and using like small minimaps and that kind of thing. So that's for games. But I also think that like when you're watching like a video and you start like folding it and you just see the video slide up on just one screen because it assumes that you want to put it on a table or something.
Sure.
I think that is really, really clever, and I would like to see more of that thinking. Yeah.
And Dave, what are some great examples of existing apps that are taking advantage of the foldable form factor?
So we've seen a lot, but actually my two favorites were shown to me by Guy. One was a battleships game where you basically have the device in a tabletop posture and you basically rotate it the other way for the other person to play.
Oh.
I thought that was beautiful.
Yes, I love that.
And the second thing he showed me was just the Kindle.
Yes.
So basically being able to have the Kindle open like a book, but also be able to fold it the other way. So like a cheap paperback where you fold it and you hold it with one hand.
Exactly.
I would never do that to any of my books, but being able to do that on a Surface Duo that feels like that is so nice. That I think was really compelling.
And that was the first thing when I pulled out the Surface Duo and showed my wife. The first thing she did was grab it and folded it around like it was a traditional paperback book that was so easy to hold. She absolutely loved that aspect of it. Guy, tell me, what are some other examples of some great apps that are already taking advantage of foldable?
I think two kinds of app. One is apps for consuming, and I think the Kindle is a good example of flipping a page, which is super natural. I really like that experience as well. But also apps around creation. So, for example, if you need to edit a video or edit your photos or edit a blog post, it's very easy with dual screen or with the foldable or large screen to have the actual video or photo on one side, and on the other side, all the controls. And then you hit a control and you see it real time, what happens, how does it change the other. And it's really, really helpful to create and edit your memories that way. So it's really a great creation tool as well, not just for consuming.
Yeah, I could definitely see that also would be a great value with a program like Adobe Acrobat. I'm often editing PDFs. And so I could see that would be a great use case for, not only being able to read documents, but then, making edits.
Yeah, I can also imagine with that sort of notebook, passport, sort of novel type device, where if it's light enough and thin enough, you can sort of fold it in half with a stylus and just scribble in it like you would in a normal notebook. Basically like a Moleskine, but it's a Moleskine with an infinite number of pages.
There's also psychological sense here about the folding and that you can close it. So for example, if I'm writing or scribbling or journaling with a stylus on the device when it's open, when I'm done, consider if you're doing it on a regular notebook. What are you doing? You're closing it, and it gives you a sense that you're done. You accomplished something. And I think this is where foldables really shine, because you're doing something, you're reading an email, you're journaling, you're even playing a game. Once you're done, you close it. Even you hear that little click.
Yes.
And it gives you a sense, it's like checking a box in your to-do. And I think this is something that you don't see in other form factors, and you see it only on these folding devices that really helps users stay in their flow and then move away to, do something else that is not related to the phone. So leave it off and, digital well-being and stuff.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because that was one of the first things I noticed when I closed my Duo. Hearing that little click sound and setting it on my desk, I was like, okay, I put that away.
Yeah.
That's actually another interesting effect of this is that with the foldables, initially because of weight and then eventually because of new user journeys, they switch from being in your trouser pocket, at least for me, to being in a jacket pocket. And that suddenly changes all the places I use them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I know when I first got my hands on the Z Flip, folding it to that such small form factor and putting it in my pocket just felt so much better than some of the bulky devices that I seem to carry around with me.
I actually heard that people who are using the AC Flip use the phone less because they have to open it manually. So for them, it actually helps them a lot to not like spend too much time on the phone. So there, I guess there's some psychological effect in that.
I mean, I've had the opposite with my Flip in that because it's so small and because it sort of made me take more selfies. I don't usually take selfies because, well, I usually have a real camera with me. But I have this thing, it's small enough that it's in the back pocket of my jeans. And it's just, I'm somewhere nice. And I would normally just take a photo of the place. But this thing, I can pull it out and basically, without having to unfold it or unlock it, just point it at my face, click, click, selfie, put it in my pocket again. So for that one particular user journey, I use it more.
Interesting. Yeah, I could totally see that. But tell me, Ade, what are some of the challenges that the foldable technology needs to overcome to increase consumer adoption?
I mean, if I look at the variety of devices I have, the Flip, back pocket of jeans every time. When it comes to the fold, I have to sort of look at the jacket I'm wearing and think about, okay, will the material, the lining handle the weight or should it go into my bag?
Yeah.
If I'm carrying the Surface Duo, it's light enough that I can just casually put it in my jacket pocket and it'll be fine. But it's too bulky for me to put in the front pocket of any of my jeans. And it feels dangerous to put in the back pocket. So weight is an issue. Cost is also an issue. Because the more expensive it is, the more careful you have to be when you put it away to think, will it be safe in this pocket? But as these things get thinner, lighter, cheaper, and we discover more and more user journeys, I think that's going to be really interesting. I mean, if I give an example, I have the Surface Duo 1, and it's great. But every now and again, I see somebody with Surface Duo 2, and I go, oh, they have a pen. Oh, that's interesting. And I find myself thinking, well, that might be an interesting upgrade if it was thin enough and light enough. But then I'm thinking, but will it fit in my jacket pocket?
Sure. That's interesting. Guy, tell me, what do you think are some of the challenges that the foldable technology needs to overcome?
I think the first obvious one is the price point. They're still more expensive than other form factors. So I think we're going to see the prices go down for sure. I think that would be probably my biggest one. I think we did not hit the point of, apps. Enough apps are there. We'll see more and more apps, and then everybody will want to join the party. I don't think we are in that stage yet, and I think that will come soon.
And Soren, what are your thoughts on what sort of challenges the foldable technology needs to overcome?
The foldable phone at the moment is very bulky and it's very heavy. It would be great that if it's lighter. I know that it actually puts people off, some people, that it is so bulky and heavy, where they would rather get the flip phone for that reason.
Sure.
I also think, speaking of the flip, I think battery life is very important. I don't know how much bigger battery they can put in them without it even getting more bulky and heavier. But when you have, like, on the Samsung one, there are 3 displays. And if you use it for watching films, it's really draining battery. So I would say that is the big ones for me.
So, Guy, what resources would you recommend for developers interested in creating foldable apps?
I think, our motto is really meeting the developers where they are at. So, continue using whatever you're using. If you're using a Mac or a PC, we have emulators for each one of those things. So I would start with just following the documentations. We have documentation. Samsung has, Google. Start there. Download an emulator. Try it out. And then just try the sample app. There is a code lab that we built with Google. You can try there to test some of these new capabilities on the emulator on a specific device. And then start your journey from there. Documentations, samples, emulator. We post a weekly developer blog every Thursday that brings new information. For example, how to write a game, how to use drag and drop, how to run side by side with another app, how to address the posters changes well, layout changes. So we have a blog every week that covers code. It's a developer blog with specific code and tips and tricks. Try those resources and just reach out if you have a question, if you're blocked on anything. We are really here to help you out with your journey. because we're creating the future and we want you to be successful with your app on all these new form factors.
Yeah. Are there any conferences or events that you know that you'll be attending?
Definitely. So Google I/O was just completed a few weeks back. A lot of talks around large screens. You can still follow that and see some of the talks. DroidCon is coming up. We just had DroidCon San Francisco a couple of days ago. And the next one is in Berlin, and it's a worldwide conference. Google's probably going to have future events. Samsung has a few events. Microsoft Build was just a couple of weeks ago, and we also had to talk about foldables.
Excellent. And I know, Ade, you shared with me a large list of links. Tell me, what are some of these resources that the developers can utilize?
So for us, it's really 3 buckets. There are introductory materials such as our quality guidelines that I think are really important to sort of absorb into your bones so that you can feel what a good experience will be like, and it'll nudge you as you go on. Then we have a large collection of design resources, often at the Material Design website, but also woven through developers.android.com. And then the final piece are a set of resources for the developers, things like how do I do testing, the code library with Microsoft. But those 3 buckets of resources are the right ones for you to start with. I'd also recommend come to DroidCon Berlin. We're giving a talk. A teammate of mine, Romano Franz, will be there co-presenting with somebody from Microsoft. And again, you can go grill those people, get lots of questions. And of course, there will be future Android events where we'll have more stuff to share.
Wonderful. And Soren, what does Samsung have to offer to help developers?
So Samsung, we got our own game dev space where we post blogs and tutorials, articles. And we will have some, when this podcast is out, we should have some tutorials available. We also got the GTC presentation that Mike did.
Excellent. So any more thoughts as we close the podcast on this new technology in foldables?
From my perspective, looking at my desk, I've got a Flip, a Duo, a Samsung Tab, and that really captures just the variety of form factors that are happening on the Android platform, and I look forward to seeing more. I think that's one of the things I've learned here is that there's so much going on and there's so much more to come.
I'm really looking forward to the future to see what new technology, what new devices are coming out, how the foldable phones will hopefully be more like lighter and more affordable. And I'm really looking forward to see how developers is gonna utilize them for all kind of different apps.
I think this is super exciting times. We are really in a pivotal point of, something new, a new generation of form factors is evolving, and it's happening right now. We started seeing, the version 1 of the foldables and duos. We're now seeing a second version and a third version, and I think we're going to see more of that. And this is just amazing. We're creating the future right now. And I think developers are the most important part of it because it will succeed based on the apps and what developers will do with it. And this is a great time now to join this ride and really create the future, because I think 10 years from now, we will see things that really start happening right now with apps that take it to the next steps with foldables.
Yeah, my key takeaway with the foldable industry is how many of these big companies in this industry are working together to further the technology. It was great to have, someone from Google, from Microsoft, and of course from Samsung all on the podcast today. Before we close this out, I want to ask a question of each of you. Soren, what is it that you do for fun when you're not at your desk working for Samsung?
As I already said, that I do like art. I do play music and draw. And I have an 8-month-old son that's taking up a lot of my time at the moment.
Wonderful. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And Ade, what is it that you do for fun when you can step away from your role at Google?
So I do a lot of things, but I think the main thing that occupies my time nowadays has been playing badminton. It's a huge part of the Swiss culture, and there's just a lot of people who play badminton. So it's a great game. You can actually get seriously injured in it, but you can also get very good at it. So I'd recommend it.
And Guy, what is it that you do for fun up in the Great Northwest when you get to put aside your responsibilities at Microsoft? I can see in your background now, I notice on your wall, you've got your own indoor rock climbing gym.
Yeah, exactly. So probably in the last 6 months, I've been training really, really hard to climb and summit some of the mountains around North Washington. Goal is to get even bigger mountains, but we did a couple of summits last weekend and really into climbing and summiting mountains now.
Wow.
It takes a lot of mental prep, nutrition, fitness level. And I've seen a lot of similarities between the experiences I have with preparing for a climb to even things I do at work. It's really managing a project. A lot of insights I got from mountaineering that I apply in other places.
That's great. That's great. Hey, I wanted to thank all of you for being on the podcast today. It was wonderful to hear the different voices and get a chance to chat with you all.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great show.
Cheers.
Looking to start creating for Samsung? Download the latest tools to code your next app. Or get software for designing apps without coding at all. Sell your apps to the world on the Samsung Galaxy Store. Check out developer.samsung.com today and start your journey with Samsung.
The Samsung Developers Podcast is hosted by Tony Moreland and produced by Jeannie Sue.